Alistair Crowe noticed the wrist on a Friday. She was plating the mango cardamom tart with the precision of a surgeon, movements fluid and automatic, when she reached for the offset spatula with her right hand and stopped. Just for half a second. A wince so small that most people would have missed it entirely. Alistair was not most people. He had built his empire on noticing the things people tried to hide. By midnight that same evening, Craig Hollenbeck's silver Audi was found idling in the valet lane of a Brickell high-rise 4 blocks from the apartment he'd shared with Cora Medina for the last 4 years. The keys were in the ignition. Craig was not. Cora had been awake since 4 in the morning. Not because of the alarm, she always beat the alarm, but because the bruise on her right wrist had swelled overnight and was pressing painfully against the elastic cuff of her compression sleeve. She'd spent 10 minutes in the bathroom mirror deciding between the dark chef's coat with the longer sleeves or the standard white one. She chose dark. She pulled the sleeve all the way to her palm. She told herself it didn't look like what it was. Craig had grabbed her the night before. Not with rage, not with the terrifying cold fury of a man who meant to hurt her. That was the part that made it hard to explain, even to herself. He'd grabbed her like she was a door he was trying to close. Automatic. Irritated. She'd said something about the restaurant bill, about the money she'd loaned him 3 months ago for a real estate deal that fell through, and he'd reached across and wrapped his hand around her wrist and squeezed hard until she stopped talking. "You're always bringing that up," he'd said, like she was the problem. She'd stayed quiet after that. She was good at staying quiet. Cora Medina, at 31, had a reputation in every kitchen she'd ever worked in, and that reputation was precision. She had a palate that other pastry chefs spent entire careers trying to develop. She could taste a dessert and tell you which component was a 1/4 teaspoon over, which spice had been added too early, which fruit wasn't ripe enough by exactly 2 days. The executive team at Crowe Grand Miami had recruited her from a boutique patisserie in Coral Gables, and in 2 years she had taken the pastry program from forgettable to routinely mentioned in travel press. The hotel gleamed when she walked into it at 5:15 in the morning. The lobby was all white marble and low, warm light, enormous windows overlooking Biscayne Bay. Cora badged through the service entrance, changed into her chef's coat, and began to work. The kitchen was the one place on earth where she felt entirely capable. She didn't think about Craig while she tempered chocolate. She didn't think about the $11,000 she'd transferred to his account, or the way he watched what she put on her plate at dinner with that particular expression. Not disgust exactly, something worse, something performative and corrective, like she was a child making a mess. She thought about ratios and temperatures and the way a perfectly rested tart shell sounds when you tap it. Alistair Crowe came to the kitchen every Friday. It was well known among the staff, and the information traveled the way all useful information does. Quietly, laterally, with enough low-grade anxiety, attached that everyone straightened up when Friday rolled around. He owned Crowe Grand Miami the way he owned Crowe Grand Charleston and Crowe Grand Savannah, entirely without apology. The Crowe family had run luxury hospitality on the East Coast for 3 generations, and what exactly had funded the original expansion of the hotel empire in the 1970s was something polite people in business circles didn't examine too closely. Sister himself was 44, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the particular stillness of a man who had never once needed to raise his voice to get what he wanted. He wore charcoal suits and kept his dark hair cut close. He wasn't handsome in any conventional way. His features were too sharp, the scar through his left eyebrow too prominent, but there was something about the totality of him that made rooms go quiet when he walked in. He stood at the pass and tasted the new plated dessert without speaking for a long moment, while Cora watched him from across the counter with her hands loose at her sides and her face professionally neutral. "The cardamom is forward," he said. "Intentionally," Cora said, The mango is underripe this week. The spice compensates." He looked at her then, not at the tart. "You noticed the fruit was off." "I'd notice everything that comes into my kitchen." Something shifted briefly in his expression. He set down his fork. "Hand me the second one," he said. Cora reached for the backup plate with her right hand. The movement pulled the sleeve back 2 inches. She felt the fabric shift and grabbed the plate with both hands immediately, recentering the sleeve with a small automatic motion she didn't even register as telling. Alistair registered it. He took the plate. He ate the second tart without looking at it. He was looking at her right wrist, or rather, at the dark chef's sleeve pulled strategically to the base of her palm. "When did you burn yourself?" he asked. The question arrived so casually that for a moment Cora didn't understand what he was asking. Then her stomach dropped. "This morning," she said, oven door. Alistair set down the fork. "Pastry chefs catch the oven on their forearms," he said, "coming in and out of the rack. Sometimes the hands." He paused. "Not the back of the wrist." The kitchen was suddenly very quiet. 2 of her junior pastry chefs had gone still near the proofing station. "I was reaching in at a bad angle," Cora said. Her voice was steady. She'd had years of practice at steady. Alistair held her gaze for 4 full seconds. She counted. And then he said, "Take 15," and walked out through the service corridor without another word. Cora let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. 20 minutes later, his executive assistant appeared in the kitchen doorway and told her that Mr. Crow would like her to join him for dinner in the private dining room at 6. It wasn't a request. The private dining room at Crow Grand occupied the northeast corner of the 14th floor and looked out over the bay at an angle that turned the city lights into something abstract and beautiful. The table had been set for 2. There were candles. There was wine. There was food that Cora absolutely had not made. A full spread from the main kitchen, Spanish-style octopus and jamon, and braised beef short ribs and a pile of warm bread with 3 kinds of olive oil. Cora stood in the doorway in her street clothes. Dark jeans, an oversized linen blouse, the compression sleeve still on her right wrist, and felt immediately precisely wrong. "Sit down," Alistair said. He was already seated, suit jacket gone, sleeves rolled to the elbow. "Mr. Crow, I appreciate this, but I have to get home. Craig has dinner expectations on Fridays." "His expectations can wait 30 minutes. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit, Cora." She sat because she didn't know how not to. He poured her wine without asking. He put food on the plate in front of her without asking. Then he said nothing at all, just picked up his own fork and began to eat, and somehow the absence of pressure was more disorienting than pressure would have been. "You don't have to calculate anything here," Alistair said, without looking up. Cora went very still. "I don't know what you mean," she said. "You've been here 2 years," he said. "I've watched you taste things in the kitchen. You eat freely when you're working. You trust your palate completely. But right now you're doing math in your head before every bite, like there's someone looking over your shoulder grading you." He set down his fork and looked at her directly. "There isn't." Cora's throat tightened. She was absolutely not going to cry in the private dining room of her employer. She picked up her fork. She put a piece of the braised short rib in her mouth. The fat had been rendered perfectly. The sauce was a long-cooked red wine reduction with something dark underneath it. Chocolate, maybe, or coffee, and the meat pulled apart without resistance, and despite every wall she was trying to hold up, she closed her eyes for half a second at how good it was. When she opened them, Alistair was watching her with an expression she couldn't entirely categorize. "The kitchen brings out the best in you," he said quietly. "You light up when you're working." He paused. "I want to understand what's making you small when you're not." "Nothing's making me small," Cora said automatically. "Then show me your wrist." The words landed without drama, without accusation. He simply extended his hand across the table, palm up, and waited. For a long moment, Cora didn't move. She thought about Craig's voice, the particular flat tone he used when he said you always make things into a bigger deal than they are. She thought about 4 years of small erosions that she'd explained away one at a time, each one almost reasonable in isolation, so that by the time she reached last night, it seemed like just one more thing in a long series of things that she was partly responsible for. She thought about how tired she was of explaining. She pushed the compression sleeve up to her forearm. The bruise circled her wrist like a brand, deep purple at the center, green at the edges, 4 distinct finger impressions on the inside, and a wide thumb mark on the back. It was the kind of bruise that told a very specific story about the size and force of the hand that made it. Alistair did not reach for her wrist. He looked at it for a moment, and then he looked at her face, and what Cora saw there was not pity and not horror. It was a cold, contained fury that he was visibly working to keep from the surface. "Tell me his name," Alistair said. He wasn't trying to. "His name, Cora." She told him. She told him the way you eventually tell someone the thing you've been circling for years. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in pieces, like pulling a splinter that's been there so long you'd stopped registering it as foreign. The real estate money, the way Craig tracked what she ordered at restaurants, and made small sounds under his breath. The way he answered her phone sometimes and forgot to mention the calls. The way she'd stopped having her closest friends over because it was easier than managing his mood in the aftermath. The escalation that had been so gradual she'd missed the shape of it until the shape was everywhere. Last night, the wrist. She talked for 20 minutes. Alistair listened without interrupting once. When she stopped, he was quiet for a moment, looking at the table. "You know this isn't about you," he said. "I know that," Cora said, and then she heard how automatic the response was, how completely she'd detached the knowledge from the actual belief. "You've been explaining his behavior for 4 years," Alistair said. "That's what makes it hard to leave, not weakness, not stupidity. It's that you've learned to see his problems as joint problems, things you can manage if you adjust yourself correctly. That's what people who feel entitled to control others do. They make their anger into a math problem you're supposed to solve." He paused. "You are one of the sharpest people in any room you walk into. I've watched you manage a kitchen of 11 people and 3 simultaneous service demands with less visible stress than most people handle email. And you've spent 4 years finding reasons why a man who is afraid of how capable you are gets to put his hands on you." Cora looked down at the table. "I don't want your pity," she said quietly. "Good. I don't have any." He stood. "I'm having my driver take you home tonight. His name is Renzo. He will wait at the door while you pack a bag. If Craig is there, Renzo will handle it. Then he'll bring you back here. There is a suite on 16 that has been sitting empty all month." "I can't just." "You already know you can," Alistair said. "You've known for a while." He picked up his phone and made one call, brief, voice dropping to something she couldn't hear. When he hung up, Renzo was already on his way. Craig was not in the apartment when Cora got there. His dinner was half eaten on the coffee table. The television was paused on a sports recap. His keys were on the hook. Renzo stood in the hallway with his arms loose at his sides, while Cora moved through the bedroom, pulling things from drawers with a methodical efficiency that felt surreal and also, strangely, like relief. She packed in 14 minutes. She didn't cry. She didn't know it yet, but at that exact moment, on the ground floor of a parking structure near the Port of Miami, Craig Hollenbeck was having a considerably less comfortable conversation with 2 men who had introduced themselves only by function rather than name. Alistair arrived 10 minutes after them. He stood in the fluorescent half-dark of the structure and looked at Craig Hollenbeck, who was, stripped of the context that had protected him, an unimpressive man in khakis, breathing too fast, with the focused contempt of someone who has been patient for exactly as long as he intends to be. I'm a businessman, Alistair said, his voice carrying cleanly in the concrete space. I evaluate situations simply, assets and liabilities. He paused. Cora Medina is the most valuable person working in my hotel. She has built something exceptional, and she has done it while carrying a weight that she should not have been carrying. He tilted his head. You are the weight. Craig began to say something about misunderstandings, about Cora being clumsy, about things being more complicated than they looked. Alistair raised one hand slightly, and Craig stopped. I know about the $11,000, Alistair said. I know about the 2 prior incidents the neighbors in 4C reported, but that Cora declined to escalate. I know about the pattern of cash advances and the 2 clients you overbilled last spring. He let that sit for a moment. You are not in a position to explain anything to me. One of the men set a duffel bag at Craig's feet. $150,000, Alistair said. You will use it to clear your debts. You will leave Miami. You will leave Florida entirely. You will not contact Cora Medina again. You will send her one message tonight. You will tell her you're leaving and that it's your decision. And you will be specific enough that she doesn't spend a week wondering if something happened to you. He paused. Then you take that bag and you go. Craig stared at the bag. He looked at Alistair. And if I don't, Alistair said pleasantly, the clients you overbilled receive full documentation and a referral to a very motivated attorney, and you will find that Miami is a significantly less comfortable city to exist in than it currently is. Another pause. I would strongly recommend the bag. Craig's hands were shaking when he picked up the phone. Up on the 16th floor, Cora was sitting on the edge of a hotel bed that was the size of her entire living room, wearing the robe housekeeping had left out, with her injured wrist elevated on a pillow and an ice pack resting over it, and she was waiting for the grief to arrive. Her phone buzzed. I've been thinking for a while. This isn't working. I'm going to a friend's in Atlanta. I need space, and honestly, you deserve someone who can give you what you need. I'm sorry. Don't wait up. She read it twice. She waited for the collapse, the specific, sinking feeling she had learned to associate with Craig's moods and Craig's judgment, the way he could make her feel like she was standing on ice that was about to give way. The ice didn't move. What moved instead was something in her chest, a loosening like a knot she'd stopped noticing. Because it had been there for so long it felt like structure. When Alistair knocked and she said, "Come in," she handed him the phone without explaining. He read it. He handed it back. "He's gone," Alistair said. "Yeah. How do you feel?" Cora considered the question honestly. "Like I can breathe," she said, which is strange, because I thought I had been breathing this whole time. Alistair sat down in the chair by the window, not on the bed, not close, giving her the full space of the room. The city glittered behind him, through floor-to-ceiling glass. "Why did you do all of this?" Cora asked. "I'm your pastry chef." "You have never been just anything," Alistair said. He said it without hesitation, like a fact he'd known for a while. "I watched you rebuild that program from nothing in 2 years. You run that kitchen like someone who was always supposed to be in charge of something significant." He paused. "And I watched someone take that certainty out of you, a little at a time, until you started apologizing for existing at full volume." He looked at her directly. "That ends now. You are under my protection, and starting tomorrow, you take up exactly as much space as you have always deserved to." Cora looked at him for a long moment. "Get some sleep," Alistair said, standing. "Everything else can wait until tomorrow." 6 months passed. Miami moved through its seasons the way Miami does, not with cold and warmth, but with rain and sun, with the thick heat of summer softening into the drier clarity of late fall, and Cora moved through it differently than she had before. She still ran the pastry kitchen, but 3 months after the night she'd packed her bag, in 14 minutes, Alistair had offered her a consulting contract across all 3 Crow properties, full creative control, her name on the menus, a salary that reflected what her work was actually worth. She had signed without hesitating. The compression sleeves were gone. She'd let her sous chef, Daniela, talk her into a shopping trip that had produced a green silk wrap dress and a pair of wide-leg linen trousers in deep burgundy that she wore to the bi-weekly menu meetings on the 14th floor. She hadn't lost a single pound. She hadn't tried to. It had taken a while to stop waiting to want to, and then one morning she simply didn't. Daniela, who had known something was wrong for most of the 4 years and had been too afraid to say it directly, had cried in the walk-in cooler one afternoon and said, "I should have pushed harder, I should have said something." Cora had hugged her and said, "You couldn't have made me hear it before I was ready," which was the truest thing she'd said in a long time. They had standing Friday lunch together now, loud and unhurried at the Cuban place on 8th Street, and it had become one of the fixed points of her week. She and Alistair had developed something she didn't have a precise word for yet. Dinner sometimes in the private room, long conversations about the hotel expansion, about flavor theory, about things that had nothing to do with either. He treated her with a specific, concentrated attention that she found simultaneously steadying and unnerving. They hadn't named it, they hadn't needed to yet. It was a Tuesday afternoon in November when the text started. Cora was in the pastry kitchen, finishing development on a new petit four for the holiday menu, when her phone lit up with an unknown number. She nearly didn't look. "Hey, I'm in Miami. We need to talk." She recognized the number anyway. She'd memorized it without meaning to, the way you memorize the number of something that used to cost you. She didn't respond. The second message came an hour later. "I know about the Crow family. I know what the shipping operations are actually used for. I did my research, Cora. Tell your boyfriend I want $400,000 wired by Friday, or I go to someone who cares about what I know." Cora set down her spatula. She read it twice. Then she put her phone in her pocket, went back to the petit four, and worked, slowly, precisely, until her hands were steady. She told Alistair at 6. He read the messages. His face said nothing useful. "Where is he?" Alistair asked. He didn't say, "But I'd like to be the one to talk to him first." She met his eyes when he looked up. "I know what I'm doing." A silence followed, then "Renzo goes with you." Craig was at a chain hotel bar on Brickell, the kind of place designed to feel like it belongs nowhere in particular. He looked like the money had been gone for months. He was sitting with a beer and the particular self-righteous energy of a man who had convinced himself he held something valuable. Cora sat down across from him. Renzo took a position near the door. "You look different," Craig said. "I am different," Cora said. "Godfrey didn't mean it." He leaned forward. "I know what you need," Cora said, "and I need you to hear something first, before you say another word." She set her hands flat on the table, steady. "You spent 4 years telling me I was too much. Too heavy, too sensitive, too expensive, too loud, too slow to understand that I was the problem in every room." Her voice was even, not cold, not hot, the same voice she used when she explained to a junior chef exactly why a component had failed. Precise, final. You were wrong. Every single time you were wrong. And the saddest part is that I let you say it long enough that I started to believe you. Craig opened his mouth. "I'm not finished." She didn't raise her voice. "You weren't afraid that I was too much. You were afraid that you weren't enough. You couldn't watch someone build something real with their life that you couldn't build with yours, so you made it your project to make me smaller instead." She picked up her bag. "Whatever you think you know about Alistair's business, I would encourage you to consider very carefully what it means to threaten a man like that with information that may or may not be what you think it is." She stood. "I'm not going to say goodbye," she said. "We did that already and it didn't hold. This time it will." She turned toward the door. Behind her, she heard Craig start to say something loud and contemptuous, something that began with fat and never got to finish. The bar door opened from outside. Alistair had not stayed in the car. He walked in without urgency, nodded once to Renzo, and crossed to where Craig was now very much alone at his table with a half-empty beer and the undivided attention of 3 men who had materialized quietly from the street. "She asked me to wait," Alistair said, his voice pleasant and very quiet. I waited. He sat down in the chair Cora had just vacated and looked at Craig Hollenbeck with the specific expression of a man who has made a decision and is implementing it without drama. "Now you and I are going to have a different conversation than the one you planned." Whatever Craig said after that, Cora didn't hear. She was already in the lobby, and then the elevator, and then the rooftop terrace 22 floors up, leaning against the railing with a glass of water and the Miami skyline spread out in every direction. The wind off the bay was warm and moved through her hair. Below, the city ran its usual indifferent business: lights, traffic, the dark stripe of the water. She heard Alistair's footsteps before the terrace door opened. "He's handled," Alistair said, stepping out into the wind. "I know." He crossed to the railing and stood beside her, close but not quite touching, looking out at the city. "You didn't need me down there," he said. "No," Cora agreed, "but I wasn't sorry you came." A long quiet followed. It was the comfortable kind. "I owe you something," Alistair said, and the register of his voice had shifted, out of the careful professional range and into something more direct, something that had been waiting for a long time to find the right moment. "What's that?" Cora asked. "An honest thing." He turned from the view to look at her. "You are the most genuinely capable person I've worked alongside. You rebuilt an entire program, took on a 3-property consulting role, and you've done all of it with a clarity and confidence that I watch people half your age struggle to develop." He paused. "And I have done all of that watching while also trying to find the right moment to tell you that I think about you considerably more than is strictly professional." Cora turned to look at him. "How long?" she asked. "Longer than I should have," Alistair said. She was quiet for a moment, then, "The wrist, you noticed it immediately." "I notice everything about you," he said, and the simplicity of it landed harder than anything elaborate would have. "I have for a long time." The city hummed below them. A boat moved across the dark water of the bay, its running lights small and steady. "I don't need to be rescued anymore," Cora said. "I know that," Alistair said. "I'm not offering rescue." He reached out and took her hand. Carefully, the right one, his thumb resting gently over where the bruise had been. It was healed now, gone for months, nothing left but smooth skin, but the gesture acknowledged the whole history of it anyway. "I'm asking if you want a partner." Cora looked at him. She thought about the woman she had been 14 months ago, standing in the lobby of this hotel in a dark chef's coat with her sleeve pulled to her palm, convincing herself that what she had at home was what she deserved. She thought about the woman she was now. "Ask me properly," she said. The corner of his mouth moved. He was not a man who smiled easily, but when he did, it was total. "Cora," he said, "run this with me, not just the kitchen, all of it. I've been running this thing alone long enough to know I don't want to do it anymore, not if you're an option." She stepped closer, tilted her face up to his. "Yes," she said, "obviously yes." When he kissed her, it was with the particular quality of something that had been waiting a very long time to happen, and was not in a hurry now that it finally had. His arms came around her, and she didn't shrink, didn't second-guess the space she took up against him, didn't arrange herself smaller out of old habit. She was exactly the size she was, and it was exactly right, and she had the brief, private thought that she wished she could send it backwards somehow, not the kiss but the certainty, to the woman 14 months ago who had not yet learned that relief and belonging could feel like the same thing. The city kept going below them, brilliant and indifferent, and Cora Medina held on.